On the first Sunday in December 1941, Americans were doing what Americans did on any normal Sunday.
I'd been to see another string of interminable westerns at the Plaza, which we went every Saturday and Sunday, and Guns of the Pecos was the movie that was playing.
My father and I were in the living room listening to the Giants football game. My father was sitting next to me suddenly when they announced that Pearl Harbor was attacked.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor by air.
I came home to a household that was somber and quiet, and the radio was on, and was told that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, which I had no idea where it was. I'll tell you what struck my mind. I thought it was somewhere in Oregon.
Soon every American would know that over 2,000 of their countrymen had perished in the Japanese attack on Hawaii's Pearl Harbor, and that nearly half the U.S. fleet had been destroyed.
Well, it was absolute horror. People were just shocked. When it happens, you don't know what to think. You're just standing there wondering, what happens now?
And it was terrifying. We sat down and looked at each other for a couple of minutes, and Max said, "No more civilian clothes." It was a very bad time.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
President Roosevelt told an America shocked out of its isolation and innocence that in order to win this war, every man, woman, and child would have to become part of the fight.
Never before have we been called upon for such a prodigious effort. Never before have we had so little time in which to do so much.
I remember as a young boy, fear of the Japanese, that submarines were going to come up in Santa Monica, and there was a lot of fear then.
Just 4 days after the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor, Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy declared war on the United States.
The world was a very dark place. The German U-boats were sinking tankers right off the coast of Florida and New Jersey, within sight of bathers on the beach.
The oceans, which had historically kept America invulnerable, had been penetrated by enemies from both east and west.
We had to destroy those people to save ourselves and to save the United States. Then we all rushed off to the recruiting stations. Everybody I knew who was my age or close to it was in the services. If you were brave, you were in the Marine Corps. Everybody was in one thing or another, and almost all of us were in the Army. The Axis had to be defeated, and we knew that nobody was going to do it except us.
Volunteers and draftees shed their civilian identities in basic training camps that united grocers from Kansas with mechanics from Monterey and bookkeepers from Brooklyn. Within 6 months, many would be sent to battlefields around the world, leaving behind parents, wives, and children. From an army of 300,000 in 1940, American armed forces would swell to 15 million. At the beginning of the war, there was considerable fear that these hastily assembled citizen soldiers could hold their own against a highly trained and heavily equipped enemy. News from the front had not been good. 3 months after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese had inflicted a series of humiliating defeats on an America whose confidence was shaken. On February 23rd, 1942, the president tried to calm and to rally a frightened nation.
This is war. The American people want to know and will be told the general trend of how the war is going.
During the war at night, the mills would be going full blast, and the sky would pulse red with the blast furnaces going off. And we were told at school, and we heard on the radio and saw in the newspaper that Pittsburgh was helping to win the war.
In Detroit, it took just 9 months to convert the entire capacity of the American automobile industry to war production.
They dubbed Detroit as the arsenal of democracy. The plants operated 24 hours a day, around the clock. You had bombers coming off the line every 5 minutes. Work till they almost fall out, then somebody take your place. I was working on the Jeeps. I sprayed the Jeeps with this olive paint. Can you imagine working 18 and 24 hours a day, staying in the shop? You run home and look at your family and run back to the shop again.
With existing manpower strapped to the limit, there was another pool of workers ready to be tapped.
Factory owners were very reluctant to hire women. They argued they'll never learn how to operate these complex machines, and if they come onto the assembly line, they'll distract the men, productivity will go way down, and besides, they shouldn't leave their homes. It'll be the end of the home and the family. But then by about 1942 or 1943, when so many men were in the armed forces, they had to turn to women. So suddenly the whole attitude toward women coming to work changed.
Between 1940 and 1944, the number of women in war-related industries rose 460% to a high of 19 million, a full third of the entire civilian workforce. Half of those women were wives and mothers who had never held jobs before.
My mother was a nice lady who baked and cooked and cleaned house and whacked her kids around to make sure they stayed in line. And suddenly, she's running a machine at an aircraft factory. She felt she needed to do something.
I think there was an underlying, unexpressed kind of patriotism, not the kind that waves flags, but it was the kind that loved our lives, that loved our country, and we all worked for one reason, to get those airplanes in the sky.
In Boeing's Seattle plant, half the workers were women. In just 4 years, they turned out over 12,000 B-17 bombers.
They call it the Flying Fortress. Most awesome plane. Oh, what a feeling of accomplishment. Even if you only did the riveting on part of it, they couldn't have done it without you.
I became an ABS welder, top of the line. I wore a leather suit. I had a helmet with glasses through it. I pulled this down. I could see through the glass in the helmet. I had a acetylene torch to join pieces of steel together. I was determined that I was going to build ships to show Japan that we would hit back.
Thanks in large part to these women workers, American factories turned out 4,000 tanks and 4,500 planes every month. And ships, which used to take 1 year to assemble, were now being completed in 17 days. Production expectations were not only being met, they were being surpassed.